So I've set up my pianos and organs and all my Genesis keyboards here to show how you get the original Genesis sounds, or very close to them, with modern day equipment, because using the old Genesis equipment is a problem, because stuff like that is very expensive, hard to get hold of, and not very reliable these days because it's so old. So the first thing we come to is the piano. And Genesis used a number of different piano sounds. In the early days they used a thing called a Hohner pianette, and I'll show you what that sounds like. You can use any reasonable digital piano equivalent, and what I've done here is to get the Hohner pianette sound, which was used on Supper's Ready and the first few albums. I combined two electric pianos, one that sounds a bit like a Rhodes and one that sounds a bit like a Wurlitzer, because the pianette is somewhere between the two. And if you listen to this, you'll get an idea. This is a bit from Supper's Ready. And you'll probably recognise that bit from Supper's Ready just as the piano comes in. Of course, there's another piano sound that's very familiar with Genesis, which is the RMI piano, which was used later. And for that, the RMI had various presets, including that you could select. Piano was one of them, and another one was a harpsichordy, luty sound. You could mix these sounds together to give this unique sound. Now, often also Tony Banks used to use chorus to great effect, so I'll add a bit of chorus and we'll see what that does. Tony Banks, for the synth sounds, used very often an ARP Pro soloist for a lot of the classic Genesis songs of the 70s. And the ARP was a preset synthesizer basically, but you could do a lot of very expressive sounds because you could use aftertouch, which means you could, by the way you played the note and held on to the notes, you could get various effects like vibrato and portamento and that. So it's very important to use the aftertouch effect of a modern keyboard to try and simulate this in the cage solo. You can see the difference with the vibrato effects you can get with aftertouch. Basically what you want is an organ that allows you to recreate all the Hammond sounds that Tony Banks used. There are lots of Hammond clones out there, and this one allows you to do some very nice things, the usual percussion sounds, which gives it that attack sound that Banks used, which I'll demonstrate, and you want some different rotary speaker settings. But most of the time after the first few albums, Tony Banks didn't use a Leslie speaker. Instead he had a very interesting combo, which I'll show you here. He had a chorus pedal and he had a MXR Phase 100 pedal, and particularly this MXR Phase 100 had some unique sounds, and between the two of them he recreated a kind of Leslie sound but without a Leslie speaker. These Leslies were these old revolving speakers, and if I play a chord here from the Lamb, you'll recognise the effect. This is from In the Cage, of course. The Memetron, which I bought from Mannequin Electronics in Germany, it's just arrived yesterday. I'm very proud of it. Fantastic sounds. What I've got here is I've got a preset Memetron Genesis, which I'm just going to load. There we go, loading file. I chose to buy the Memetron rack module, as you can see, attached to a MIDI controller keyboard. The reason I did this was that basically you can have 6 sounds on the rack module, but you only get your basic 3 on the keyboard version, although of course you can load and change additional ones. For Genesis it's quite useful to have the 6 because you want the Genesis 888 choir, you want the sound for Watcher of the Skies, which is a unique mix of strings and brass on the right hand and a bass sound on the left hand, and you want the violins for songs like Fountain of Salmacis and Firth of Fifth, and you also want brass, a sound called Brass B, which was a mellotron sound that was used at the end of Supper's Ready. So those are the kind of minimum four. You also need flutes if you're going to play the Battle of Epping Forest. So there's quite a lot of beautiful mellotron sounds. The mellotron was a massive big instrument using real tapes, and was probably one of the earliest sampling instruments. There was an earlier one called the Chamberlain, but the mellotron basically was a British-made tape sampling keyboard, which Tony used on many Genesis albums to create some lush sounds. Now, using a real mellotron, they're very expensive to buy, they're difficult to maintain because of the mechanical nature. And until recently I used to use a laptop running a program, a virtual instrument called an M-tron, which was fine, except that for live performance that's not really the way to go, I think, in case your laptop crashes. So I had been using it for a while, but the Memetron, they've resampled a lot of the sounds, and they're really tremendous. So I'm going to show you some of these sounds. And again, you can use any MIDI controller keyboard. Let's first demonstrate the famous Watcher of the Skies sound, which much loved sound, very powerful opening. To on the Memetron you need is the choir sound, which is a very famous Genesis sound, very characteristic. It's used in lots of places, like for instance the end of Afterglow. Beautiful sound. The strings sound and the triple violin sound. Used in the Fountain of Salmacis. And finally the Brass B sound, which is used in Supper's Ready, both in the Willow Farm and at the end of Supper's Ready,